Thank you very much. Well, turning overseas, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko said Wednesday that Russia has moved most of its troops from rebel-held eastern Ukraine. Poroshenko also emphasized that Ukraine would remain a sovereign, united country under a peace plan he approved last Friday. But parts of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions of eastern Ukraine may get greater autonomy. For analysis on this ongoing crisis, I spoke earlier with Anthony Salvia. He's a former U.S. State Department official and Russian affairs specialist, and Ambassador Bill Courtney, who is the former ambassador to Kazakhstan and Georgia. Don't usually get to talk to both of you at the same time. This is a treat. Thank you so much for coming in at the same time. Well, let me start here. I want to get both of your perspective on this. Russian President Vladimir Putin seems to be a bit of an enigma, a contradiction from time to time. He championed a ceasefire between the rebels in the Ukraine. Ukrainian fighters are saying that many of the Russian fighters have pulled out of the country. Some have said up to 80%. However, Putin just said, we have warned many times that we would have to take corresponding countermeasures to ensure our security, adding that he'd now take personal charge of the government commission overseeing military industries, plus a test of a missile. A very strong nuclear missile is scheduled. What do you make of this, and is this the start of a new arms race? Bill, I'll start with you.
Well, President Putin has been unhappy for some time with the quality of military industry in Russia. For example, a few years ago, the Russians ordered a new assault ship for amphibious troops, actually 2 of them, from France, because Russian shipyards could not build them. So the quality issue in Russian defense production has been a frustration for the president. He is now trying to take more measures in that area, but it's still going to be hard.
And what about you, Anthony? What do you make of these recent statements?
Well, I think it should be seen against the backdrop of the recent NATO meeting in Wales, where there's a decision was made to create a kind of what they call a spearhead force. That would be some 4,000 troops that would be based in Eastern Europe. And the issue here isn't so much the number of troops that are involved as the idea of the possibility of permanent basing of troops in countries like Poland, very near to the Russian border. So quite apart from the question of Ukraine and the whole question of what's happening with the ceasefire and the status of forces and how things are playing out militarily and politically in East Ukraine, there's the question of how does he deal with NATO, which is a matter of great concern to Russia. It's seen as a hostile military alliance, rightly or wrongly they see it as hostile.
Yeah, Anthony, I think you raise a very interesting point. Putin has accused this recent NATO summit of using the Ukraine crisis to resuscitate itself. Is this a bit of saber rattling, if you will? Anthony?
Saber rattling. I think it's countermeasures. I think that's what he has to look at the situation across the board. I think he's trying to make an impression on NATO. Absolutely, sure.
Bill, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, it's useful to compare the Russian reaction after the invasion of Georgia in 2008 and this case. After the Russian invasion in 2008, the West really didn't take very strong measures. Certainly, it did not cause NATO to reassess its attitude toward Russia in some fundamental way. This is different. This has caused a big change. So to some extent, Russia has unleashed a bear by its aggression in taking over Crimea, and then going beyond that to send Russian troops and arms and rebels into eastern Ukraine, where perhaps up to 2,000 Russian troops have died, according to Ukrainian reports. And you have seen that the Kremlin says that there are no Russian troops there, and there are indications in Russia that the government is trying to cover up the burials of troops who were killed in Ukraine. So to some extent, the Kremlin may realize now that it took one step too far by going into Crimea and especially into eastern Ukraine.
Right. Well, let me just say, Bill, to that had we allowed the democratic process to continue in Ukraine back in the winter of this year, Crimea would still be part of the Ukrainian Republic. There would be no war in the east. We'd be facing elections in February of 2015 that could have replaced Yanukovych, the previous president who was overthrown. So, I mean, the way Putin and his people look at it, that the whole effort on the part of U.S. and Europe and all that, the support that it gave to the people who were trying to overthrow the government, were part and parcel of an effort, a long-standing effort on the part of the West to sort of drag Ukraine into the Western camp, to put it in NATO and things like that. So these things are all related. And so, I see Washington's point of view, the U.S. point of view, and I understand what Russia has done here is a challenge to international law in terms of what happened in Crimea. But on the other hand, these things are complex and they're interrelated. And, we can't, it's not enough to say simply that Russia has destabilized Ukraine in this situation as far as they're concerned. I'm not saying we have to see their point of view, but sometimes it's helpful to do that. They feel that we destabilized Ukraine in our support for the overthrow of Yanukovych.
So the Kremlin has basically misunderstood both the Arab Spring and what has happened in what are called color revolutions in Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, and Ukraine. From the Russian perspective, these are all engineered from the West. In fact, that's not the case. These are genuinely popular revolutions. For example, remember in Tunisia when that street seller immersed himself in flame out of frustration, and then a popular revolution occurred there and it occurred in several other countries as well. The West can't really control those kinds of revolutions. It may be supportive of revolutions that seem like they're going in a more democratic direction, but these are popular uprisings. And what happened with President Yanukovych, he fled Ukraine on his own because he saw that this was a genuine popular uprising, and he had lost support even in his own party, the Party of Regions from Eastern Ukraine. He flew back to Eastern Ukraine and within days found out he wasn't welcome, so left and went to Russia.
I want to turn the page if we can. I know that you guys probably could go back and forth on this, on the nuances, but let's talk a little bit about the newly constructed EU sanctions. They've prepared a new wave of sanctions which would include restricting financing on Russian state-owned oil companies and banks, expanding the list of individuals that are on the list that would not be allowed to enter EU countries, and a few other things. However, the EU has held off on implementing those sanctions. I guess my question to both of you is it time to move forward with these? Bill?
Well, Chancellor Merkel, for example, has said that those expanded sanctions, should be implemented immediately because it's not at all clear that Russia is going to cease using force in eastern Ukraine. But the new European Union Foreign Minister, Italian Mogherini, she said the European Union has not yet fully agreed on what to do. It's important that those sanctions reflect what's actually taking place on the ground. And as long as Russian forces, even if most of them have pulled out of Ukraine, as long as Russian forces are in eastern Ukraine, those sanctions probably make sense.
Anthony, very briefly.
Well, the problem the Europeans are having is that quite a few European states object to them. Finland has expressed concerns about them, Slovakia, Hungary, Cyprus. The Germans don't say much openly about it, but I was in Germany last week, and the discussions I were having with people were that there's a lot of concern. What are we doing with these sanctions? These are not influencing Russian behavior one bit, and meanwhile we're harming ourselves. It's a big problem. That's why the Europeans are hesitating on the implementation of these things.
I think unity is the key in this regard. We're going to have to stop the conversation right now. But thank you, gentlemen. Bill Courtney, Anthony Salvia, appreciate having both of you.